Welcome to this lesson on input. My name is Donna Martin and I'll be your instructor. In this particular lesson, we want to start talking about how to interact with our user and ask them questions. For instance, it would be nice to just ask them when we're calculating the volume of a sphere if we could get the radius from the user instead of always setting it ourselves. That's going to lead us to a discussion of the scanner class in the Java util package. And we'll also talk about the next methods that are associated with the scanner class. That'll lead us to discussion about delimiters. How do you know when you're done getting the input from the user? What determines a succinct answer? And then that'll get us all set up so that we can do some interaction with our users. We already discussed the fact that the in field of the system class has the ability to read from standard in. But it does it 1 byte at a time, which we don't want to have to deal with it at that level. We want to be able to pull in strings and floating point numbers and integers and not have to read them 1 byte at a time and put them back together again. So we're going to use a different utility. We're going to use the scanner class, which is in java.util. So if you were to look up java.util in your documentation and then go down in classes to scanner, you would see this information that we have going on here with the scanner class. So we're going to have to import the scanner class of java.util. And what it's going to allow us to do is to read in floats and ints and strings, and so larger entities that we can store in variables and add and subtract or whatever we want to do with them. So here is how it works. They're just giving us an example here, which is the simplest thing to start with. We're going to be using the in field of the system class. So what we'll be doing is calling this scanner class, and we can associate it with a string, or what we really want to do is associate it with standard in. So we'll be passing in system.in so that we're tying it to the int that the user can type in. So we'll create a new scanner class and tie it to system.in, and we'll be storing that in some variable that's of type scanner. Then we're going to use these methods called the next methods, and there's one for each data type. There's a next int and a next long and a next float and so on and so forth. So we'll be using those. So obviously we have to have some sort of a feel what's coming next on the command line. But what we're going to, or not the command line, but the console. What we're going to be doing is asking the user a question, and then we're expecting an answer, and we should know the data type of the answer. So we'll just be using these next methods to create this dialogue with our user. So let's go down and look at these actual methods. There's all kinds of descriptions about what's happening and how numbers are represented and here are all the constructors. But what we're interested in are the actual methods that we see down here. Now there are some find patterns. If you're looking for a specific pattern, you can use some of the find methods. But what we are primarily interested in is just the next method. So we're going to scroll down to the ends here. And there is next, which just goes and gets the next complete token. There is next, and you can specify a pattern. You can specify a string that will give you the next token if it matches the pattern constructed from this string. There's the next big decimal, there's the next big, the next boolean, the next byte, the next double, the next float, the next int, and so on. So there's a next for every data type that you have here. And so let's just go ahead and go out to an online compiler and see how this works. Now I'm going to use Rex Tester. If you weren't with us for part 1, you may not have used Rex Tester before, but it's one of the online compilers that we used in part 1. I can't use my compileJava.net because it doesn't do standard in. It doesn't let you type in input. It lets you do things on the command line, but not like an interactive situation where you ask the user a question. So we're going to use Rex Tester, which is at rextester.com/runcode. There's several other online compilers that let you do standard in, so whatever you want to use. Now the default that it comes up in is C#, but we need to go to Java. And so it will bring up this sample program for us. Now it has a couple restrictions just because of how it's set up. It wants its class to be called Rex Tester. So we don't get to specify public, class, and then whatever our name is. We need to fall within those particular rules. So our main class is going to, or our primary class is going to be Rex Tester. And then here we have main inside. So we're going to be doing things here with our input and output to the user. Now if I scroll down, this is just the standard hello world, but you'll see there's the run it, the save it, and then there's this show input. So this yellow box is where I can type in any answers to questions that may come up. Now this is a little different situation since it's an online compiler. We're going to pre-type our answers. So we have to know the dialogue ahead of time. So it's going to ask us a question, we provide an answer, it asks us the next question, we provide an answer, but we have to basically provide all the answers ahead of time because it's not going to let us do that interactivity. But it at least gets us a feel for handling things with Scanner. So let's go ahead and look at what classes. Now you'll notice here that Rex Tester already includes all of the langs and all of the utils, but we really aren't wanting to do that. We're just going to include the ones that we need. And we have already seen that this is the Scanner class of the util package. And if I go back for just a minute to the documentation, we'll see that that's what was here, the Scanner class of the util package. So let's start by asking our user a question. For instance, let's find out what their name is. What is your name? And if we were doing this and we truly had an interactive environment, we might want this to just be a print rather than a print line so that they could type their name right there at the end of the question. But since we have to type in all of our answers ahead of time, I'm not going to worry about that. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to go and get the string that they type in. So we need to go look at these next methods and see how we go about doing that. So let's go back to the Scanner documentation and see what's happening. Now here in the example that we already looked at, here is a next int. But one of the things I want to talk about before is how does it decide when it's done looking for an integer, or in our case is looking for a string. And that's what this specification is right here. A scanner breaks its input into tokens using a delimiter pattern, which by default matches white space. And then it converts those into the values of the different types using like next int or next long or next float. You tell it what it is that you're looking for. So if we're doing just a string, it's just the next method. If we scroll down, there isn't a next string, we just say next. So let's look at the next patterns again. There's next, which just gets the next complete token from the scanner, so whatever there is before the white space, and then it's going to go ahead and we could do big decimal and all of that. So we're going to ask for a name, and then let's ask for two integers that we're going to add together. So we're interested in next, and then we're also going to be interested in next int or long or short, whatever you want. So let's look at next int, and all that it does is it works the same way as our other next things, but it returns an int to us. There's some possible errors that can be generated if there's a problem, if the scanner's closed and there's not an open channel for it to get data, but basically it's going to go and get an int for us. Let's look at just next so that we make sure that we're good with it. It's going to return a string, and then it says the complete token is preceded and followed by input that matches that delimiter pattern, which is that white space pattern. So let's go ahead and try these back in our compile and see what happens. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is to create a new scanner class. So we're going to create a scanner. Let's just call it scan input or whatever you want to call it, and that's going to be a new scanner class. And if you remember the examples, we have to tie it to something, and we're going to tie it to system.in. That way it'll go to our standard in and get the values. So this is what we're going to be using as we go along here, and we call these routines. This scan input is the object that we're going to use the next int method of. So here we are with your name. What is your name? So we have to go get that value. And if you remember, if I look one more time at next, it's returning a string to me. So I'm going to need to do something with that string. In our case, if I just want to print it out, I could do that, or if I want to store it in a variable, whatever you think. Let's go ahead and store it in a variable, string your name, and then that's going to be equal to the return of scan inputs next method. So let's just start with that and see if we get any errors to begin with, and then we'll see how we could print this out. Now, since I have to do this ahead of time, I'm going to go ahead and type in Donna as the answer to the question. So when I run it, it says, what is your name? And then it went and got Donna. I haven't done anything with that yet, but I didn't get any error messages, which is really what I was interested in knowing here. It printed my prompt. Now let's go ahead and print out the results so that I can see, basically what's happening here. Let's print out something like hello, and then we'll put the name. So your name. And then hopefully that'll show us that we did indeed go and get Donna. So let's run this again. We get, what is your name? Hello, Donna. So I did successfully go out and get the name. Now let's say that we want to, as we were mentioning, go ahead and get two integers and print them out, or add them together. So let's ask for them. That's the only thing here. Since we're interacting with the user, we're going to have to ask questions. So let's tell them that we would like them to please enter two integer numbers. Please enter two whole numbers is normally probably what we would say if we were talking to a user. So we'll say, please enter two whole numbers, and then we need to again go get those. So we're going to have an integer, let's just call it number 1. That's going to be, again, our scanner object, and this time we're going to get a next int. And that'll go into number 1, and then I can do exactly the same thing and put it into number 2. And then let's just tell them, what the answer is if we were to add those two numbers up. Let's just say the sum of your two numbers is, and then we will append the value of number 1. Oh, I called them both number 1, didn't I? I'll fix that. Number 1 plus number 2, and then we'll print that out and see what happens. But I should make this be number 2 instead of number 1. All right, let's go down here. I've got my name. Let's go ahead and just enter 45 and 30 and see if this works. So we should get, hello Donna, we should get, what is your name? And then it did hello Donna. Please enter two whole numbers. We entered 45 and 30. It printed the sum of your two numbers is 75. So you can see how scanner works. Now I have entered these input values 1 on each line, but if you remember, the designation was that it was white space. So if we were doing this interactively, it's going to ask me for my name, so I'd probably have that on one line. And then it's going to ask me for the two numbers. And I just want you to see that I can put these two numbers together on the same line because it's the white space that it's searching for. So let's run this again. Let me enter a different number here so that you can see that this is indeed working. Let's run it again. And now the answer is 395 because it's 350 and 45. So it still picked up those numbers correctly. Now, since we're doing all this ahead of time, we could even put these all on the same line. Normally, though, if you think about it, that's not going to work because they're going to ask you the question of Donna, and then you're probably going to enter the carriage return, and then it would ask me to enter two integers. So this is probably more likely this scenario of what you would see if you were actually interacting one line at a time with this particular program. But let me also show you if we do this and we add it, everything is still fine. Let me make this 450 so you can see that we're running different programs here. If I run this, that's still all white space. All this in here is considered white space. So it could be tabs, it could be multiple lines. Let's do something like this, 4,500 and 350, and now run it, and it's still perfectly happy because all those things are considered white space. So it's a very simple-minded way of getting input from your user, and you have to be careful. There could be potential problems. For instance, let me just go back to what you might think is a more traditional approach. I would think probably more like this. Let's do 3500 and 4500. But if I was to say my name was Donna Martin, I might run into trouble. And indeed I do, because what's happening here is it's like Martin, it thinks is Donna is the string, because then there's some white space. So then it's having trouble with this because it thinks it's going to be an integer. So you can see that potentially you can get into trouble with this if you're not careful and aren't really sure of what type of input you're giving. But at least we have a way of doing some basic I/O back and forth with our users. Thank you for joining me for this module on input.